It's odd to walk inside a home that is no longer yours. I have lost several homes up till now. Some were taken from me by ill luck, some by force, and some I fled from in terror. Thankfully today I am walking through the home I have sold off, along with all my other holdings and trade ships. It still amazes me how much wealth one can build when he or she is, for all intents and purposes, immortal. Nalthis is the home I never deserved. I washed up upon these shores as a vagabond, cast out from my ruination. I was lower than the beggars, and I knew it. But it was my nature to reach for stability and progress. I worked hard and employed all my various skills to gain the upper hand on my fellows. It wasn't long until I had become a supervisor for a small dye mill. It was there that I first tasted of living breath. On the planet Nalthis, the stewardship of endowment, the manifestation of investiture is known as Bio-Chromatic Breath. When I was first brought under your employ, I was so caught up in the whirlwinds surrounding Roshar that I failed to dictate to you this most important of investment and shardic intent. I do so now, knowing that my current existence would not have been possible without breath. All native-born people on Nalthis are given a single biochromatic breath upon their birth. All living things in the Cosmere hold a small amount of investiture inside them, their life force or their essence. On Nalthis, they are gifted with something more. Alone, this breath is almost unnoticeable. If you were from another world and were walked the streets of Tetalia, the people would not appear to be different. But breath is like people. One alone can only do so much, but with many together, some amazing things can happen. By speaking the right words with the proper intent, the breath can be endowed into another. Although the value of a single breath changes slightly over time, the rule of thumb is that the sale of a single breath usually equates to the value of a year's salary for a lowly worker. This provides a free infusion of wealth that the poor can rely on during troubled times. The rich and mighty will often spend great fortunes to collect this breath, because of the metaphysical benefits it comes along with. These abilities are described in tiers of power called Heightenings. If one attains about 50 breaths, you will enter the first Heightening. Besides extending your life about 10 years, this gives the user aura recognition. In other words, they can discern a general amount of breath others carry, and gain some insight about the health of that breath. Most residents on Nalthis who desire breath stop at the first Heightening. At around 200 breaths, the holder gains the ability to manifest perfect pitch spontaneously. This is also known as the second Heightening. The third Heightening grants perfect color recognition and manifests at about 600 breaths. This is the curious sensation that feels almost like perfect pitch for your eyes. Some may feel that this ability grants the breath holder the ability to see more color than others, but this is not true. Instead, this allows for a stark distinction of color to be observed. I must admit, color recognition and the understanding of hues and textures is intoxicating. At an approximate requirement of 1,000 breaths, the fourth Heightening is the beginning of the rare Heightenings achieved by everyday people. When one attains the fourth Heightening, the wielder gains perfect life sense. As one acquires more breath, they instinctually become more aware of the investiture held by the people. This life sense not only lets you feel the people around you, but heightens your awareness of others who are observing you, even if they are hidden or mixed in with a crowd. This has proven invaluable. With this ability, I find myself in control of most situations before they begin. The exception to this ability comes from drabs. A drab is someone who has given up all their breath, and they are functionally undetectable via life sense. As I've grown more accustomed to this power, I find the undetectable nature of drab to be disconcerting. It is here, at the fifth Heightening, that one such as I have found the Cosmere shaking ability of longevity. When you hold about 2,000 breath, the body becomes functionally perfect. It becomes immune to most toxins, including alcohol, and most physical ailments, such as disease, headaches, and organ failure. In fact, after I attain the fifth Heightening, I no longer age. Now this is incredible, but by no means does this mean I am free of danger. While natural causes of death are now eluded, I can still fall to the sword like any other man. With this lifestyle comes risks, and I must be on guard considering how much information brokering I participate in. Thankfully, I have been blessed by other talents and granted far more advantages than just the fifth Heightening. I feel I must pause here and relate to you briefly what inspired me to attain such lofty heights of breath. I am ashamed to say that my holding of Bio-Chromatic Breath was not fueled by a desire to live and experience the Cosmere. I feel so now, but when I began my business on Nalthis, it was out of a sense of desperation and addiction. My world had been shattered, and had been left me adrift and broken. When I discovered this place, I feverishly worked, attempting to drown my past in the frantic world of business and politics. Many government officials are expected to reach the first Heightening in order to access the nation's civil functions regularly. I remember taking on those first breaths, and the euphoria that came with it. Each breath filled me up, making me feel alive in ways I'd never felt before. I found myself driven to capture more breath. Feverishly, I would claim more and more wealth, using my power to gain information I never should have known and to take things I had no right to claim. I was worse than a back-alley thief, but performed my heists on a grand scale. And every bit of profit I made I poured feverishly into getting more breath. For almost 20 years I gathered my riches and invested souls while building a financial empire. And before I knew it, I was turning 40 and didn't look a day over 25. Slowly my work had filled the gaps in my life and given me purpose. I settled down and began to focus on the dye mills and weapon forges that I had built in my fortune. And there I remained until your messenger arrived, and pulled me from my holdings. But I digress. Just because this is where I stopped collecting breath doesn't mean there are not more heightenings to learn about. At an amassed fortune of 3,500 breaths, the wielder gains instinctive awakening. Breath is not just about hoarding and collecting personal enhancements, but about giving a form of life to normally inanimate objects. By infusing breath into something, usually something that has once been alive like cloth or corpses, you can give them a measure of automation. This infusion of investiture, along with a clear command phrase spoken in your native language, can give an object temporary life shaped by the desires of the holder. This investing art is called Awakening, and it is complex and virtually boundless. The difficulty faced by a wielder of breath boils down to two things: amount of breath available and the commands that you know. The more complex the order and the larger the object in question, the more breath it will take to animate the material. When an Awakener achieves the 6th Heightening, they begin to have a natural mastery of Awakening, allowing them to instinctively understand and wield basic Awakening commands without training or practice. This also opens up the pathway for greater command research, as the instinct provided along with this breath can light the path of discovery. As I write you today, I find myself temporarily experiencing the 7th Heightening. Although this will not last long, I have allowed myself this temporary treat of seeing just how much color there is to observe at this level. I can confirm that by holding 5,000 breaths, I have gained the ability of Awakening Sense. At this level, the nature of Endowment's investiture becomes incredibly fine-tuned. Not only am I aware of the people around me, but I can feel the life of objects that have been awakened. At this level, it's like seeing a ripple of heat encasing all things that hold breath. Very few have ever held this level of power, so even with the wealth I have gathered over hundreds of years, the secrets of the last 3 known heightenings are based off historical accounts and basic realmic theory. I doubt I'll ever experience them myself. At the 8th Heightening, which reportedly requires at least 10,000 breaths, comes the ability to break commands. While I do not think it's possible to steal breath from Awakeners or the objects they infuse, it is possible to tear down their intent and potentially change the commands they are given. While this is possible without the 8th Heightening, it is so difficult it is rarely attempted. But at the 8th Heightening, Awakeners can achieve this by instinct, although I hear it is still an exhausting process. Once a command has been broken, the object and the breath it contains can be restructured according to the wills and desires of those who have broken it. I've never experienced this for myself, however, I have confirmed that it has happened. Once we step beyond the 6th Heightening, we are stepping into a level of awakening and Bio-Chromatic Breath that has hardly been observed. The few in history who have attained such levels rarely show others what they can do, so some of this is guesswork. For instance, at the 9th Heightening, which is achievable at a staggering 20,000 breaths, comes the ability to perform Greater Awakening. Tales of this type of awakening mostly come from the myths and legends of the past. Tales of stone warriors destroying armies, and of living metal that cuts through armor as if it didn't exist. Regardless, the awakening of matter that never was alive takes an incredible amount of breath, and is impossible to attempt until the Awakener achieves the 9th Heightening, as far as I know. The 10th Heightening is the highest rank of Bio-Chromatic Breath that we know of. There may be other heightening levels beyond, but if that's the case, no one has ever discovered it. Once the threshold of 50,000 breaths have been attained, all scientific and historical information becomes as useless as blind guesswork. At this point, the color surrounding the Awakener cannot be contained and begins to bend the light via light distortion. Colors seem to bend inward, almost glowing of their own accord, and anything that appears white will give off a fractured rainbow of light, similar to the effects of a prism. When someone uses breath to awaken, color is drained from nearby objects, acting as a fuel for that investment. At the 10th Heightening, this draining ability is enhanced to a perfect invocation, which draws all color out of an object, turning it white instead of the usual gray. Most impressively, this heightening comes with the ability to awaken without having to give verbal command. This mental command almost defies the rules of awakening, although it is apparently difficult to learn and master. There could be even more powers and instinctual abilities that come with the 10th Heightening, but I am not aware of them. While this is a decent summary of the Heightenings, bear in mind the art of awakening is difficult to define. For instance, it is entirely possible to reach a heightening more or less than the listed amount. The strength of each breath is different from person to person, and the small differences of each breath can influence exactly how much is needed to attain a different heightening. I feel there is still much untapped potential to be discovered in this art. For now, I am content in holding the 7th Heightening for a few more hours. This additional breath has cost me everything I own. I will no longer hold a position here on Nalthis, although that may change in the future. It was obvious to me that once we made our way back here, that there was something far more precious to me than my holdings. I can't wait to finally explain all of this to Cosmere. After all, I did this for her sake. After she's been trained in the arts of awakening, we will be moving forward. It seems there is some kind of stir about my whole homeland. I wish this was only a mission of scholarship. Yet the actions of Odium have sealed fear into my very being. I cannot be content unless I see what is going on. Until the next letter, Elsric.